Welcome back, everybody. So today I'm going to do something a little different, and that is partly talking about politics and religion. Now, that's not totally different from me, but it's different from what I've been doing lately. If you've been following me for any amount of time, you'll know the reason I started this channel is because I wanted to talk about other things than that. Not that I wanted to steer away from it entirely, but I didn't want to be pigeonholed in it, and I wanted to talk about whatever I felt like talking about. And right now, I feel like talking about politics and religion. I guess I'm a little spicy, so that might be what you see on the channel for the next video or two here. Maybe 3 or 4, who knows? It depends on what mood I'm in. In this case, I was scrolling through social media, really good idea, I know, and I started seeing a lot of memes and images and posts, whatever, however you want to label them, that were just super, super stupid. And it kind of started giving me an idea of why discourse has become so dumb in this country, especially coming from the right. I'm probably going to title this video something a little provocative. It doesn't mean that everybody on the right is stupid, of course. I'm not trying to make that generalization. But there is something in just the way we process information on social media, consume ideas, pass them around to each other, that I think specifically feeds into the kind of dumbest and ugliest impulses of the religious right. Now, if you think the left can be stupid too sometimes, I'll agree with you. That's not what I'm here to talk about specifically. I'm also not here to both sides that. I think there is something a little more dark and malicious about the nature of the right. And I think social media can appeal to that pretty easily. And that might be part of the problem. So anyway, today I'm just going to look at a few of those posts or a lot of those posts and react to them. So let's get this started, I guess. Now, before we get into the actual reactions, I want to point out this video will be different in another way. And that is it is purely unscripted. I usually script my videos pretty tightly. I don't sit there and read the scripts, but I write out what I want to say so I can pace it and everything. And so this might feel a little differently. I'm literally just going to throw up these images and give my off-the-cuff reactions to them. I hope you like that. Don't bump the mic there, buddy. I hope you like that. But let me know in the comments, do you prefer when I speak more off a script? I know that can fall into a little bit of a repetitive cadence and maybe it sounds artificial. Or do you like when I just talk like this? Feel free to give me your feedback. One other thing, some people are really, really bothered by certain things, including how I sit. I don't know if I can really help how I sit, if I'm slouched or whatever. Also, how I kind of seem to look over the top of my glasses. That's because of the prescription I use. If I looked maybe a little more in the middle of the glasses, everything would look fuzzy, and so I just can't do that. So I'm sorry. Anyway, let's bring some of these up, shall we? First off, we have this image that says, a bird can't fly without wings, a fish can't swim without water, and a soul can't reach heaven without Jesus. Amen. Well, isn't that something? First off, I guess, what do you say to this? I don't know. This is just purely an expression of religious sentiment, or I guess how religious people think the world works. There's nothing demonstrably true about this. I guess it appeals to Christians and how they feel about things. That's fine. But I don't know. If you want to sit in a circle and say this with other like-minded people, that's cool. But maybe own the fact that there's no reason to think this is true at all. It's just something you read out of a book and kind of how you interpreted that book. So whatever. Also, dolphins aren't fish, please. And I did scroll through the comments on this. Nobody said that. Nobody pointed out, even among all the commenters on this, they're too busy saying amen and stuff. Maybe it's just me being picky, but also maybe that's part of the core anti-intellectualism of this, or willful ignorance that is part of the problem. Yeah. Next one. This is how our military sleeps, so I really don't care about illegals being overcrowded in detention centers. This is something I notice a lot in these things, is a large percentage, and I haven't done the math or anything like that, fall back to just an equivalency. Like, hey, you're okay with this, why aren't you okay with that? So yeah, I can appreciate the conditions our service members live in, but they signed up for it. When you take an issue of just pulling people off the street at random and separating them from their families and detaining them, and compare that just to how people who chose to sign up from the military sleep, even when that comparison isn't good on its face, you're being dumb on purpose. I'm sorry. That's what this is. This is just looking for an excuse to dismiss something when the comparison really isn't there. Also, I just hate when they use the word illegals. It's just a really dehumanizing word, obviously. All right, here we have a picture of a construction worker standing next to a deer. Construction workers holding a sign that says working people for Democrats. Deer's holding a sign that says deer for hunters. And the deer says, it makes as much sense as your sign. So what do I even say to this? What does this even mean? Now, I know Democrats aren't perfect on this issue, so I'm not trying to heroize either side. But if I were to pick one for the sake of workers, maybe the one that's not, clearly trying to bust up unions and support billionaires and things like that. So okay. So even if there is some truth to the fact that Democrats don't have our interests at heart, just like Republicans don't because they're all politicians, that's not what this sign is getting at. Clearly, this is saying that Republicans are the pro-worker party and the Democrats are, out to get us or something. Who knows? It's just stupid. I guess the problem with this one, and maybe why I'm having trouble getting traction with it, is because it's just purely meaningless. This, I think, is another trend we're seeing, which is just blurting out some assertion that doesn't have any basis in reality, but just reinforces your idea of what both parties are like. Who knows? All right, now we have one from an organization called Creation Ministries International, based in the United States. You don't say. These two images explain why we cannot insert millions of years into the Bible. Deep time always requires blah, blah. I don't need to read all that. The point of the cartoon, I guess, is, it's going to take a second to absorb this all. There's an ape. Death goes uphill and makes a human. Okay, so the more death there is, I guess, the more you evolve and create people. And then, according to the Bible, Eden, a guy eats a purple fruit and you go downhill into a grave. So I guess the thing about deep time, obviously, is that evolutionists require a lot of time in order to explain how dying creates life or creates more sophisticated life. The Bible properly understands that when a guy eats a fruit he's not supposed to eat, then everyone dies. Whatever. It's okay. By the way, I was pretty dismissive of that. I also just want to stop and point out that as stupid as this is, grown adults read this and take it seriously. This informs how they view the world. So it informs how they view the world scientifically, religiously, and by extension, I think, politically. All right, here's a guy kind of praying. Looks like maybe he's in anguish. So I can't tell whether he's just feeling guilty or whether he's just praying or whatever. When you choose sin, you are worshiping the devil, not honoring God with your life. Todd Friel. Boy, that guy's just a gem, isn't he? So what's to be said about this? I think this is along the lines of that earlier one we did about, you can't get to heaven without Jesus. This is just blurting out an idea from Christian theology, how they understand our behavior in the world. Nothing demonstrable about this. I don't care what sin is or what you think sin is. I care whether behavior is constructive and helpful or harmful and it hurts people. If you want to label something sin, better be ready to explain how it fits that mold, or I don't care. And doing things that you call sin isn't worshiping anything. Sorry. All right, we got another little screen. I guess it's a screen grab from a Tom and Jerry thing or something. You can't claim to be fighting fascism while waiting for policies that would make a fascist takeover easier. So I guess a gun grabber, quote unquote, is reading this and it's all upset because it's just being given a dose of truth it can't handle. So I guess this is just kind of a no you thing. Clearly the right is taking a fascist turn or has delved completely into fascism. By the way, the word fascist has been misused a lot. I think a lot of people in our society equate it with just totalitarianism or government overreach. Fascism is something more specific that involves a country looking back to an idealized past, a specific strongman leader appealing to that past, such as Make America Great Again, and saying that he's going to bring that back, demonizing a specific group of people, saying that they're the cause of all the problems, that we are perfectly great and strong. Our country and our people are unique. Our bloodline is unique. And these people here are poisoning it, and we're being stabbed in the back by this collection of devious people. And so our country has gone downhill, and we're going to bring it back again by bringing back certain traditions and getting rid of certain people and stuff like that. That body of rhetoric is what fascism is for the most part. I know all words are malleable, but if we're going to make fascism a specific reference point, or if we're going to make it mean anything specific related to the movements in the early to mid 20th century that arose, and that word was being used to describe, we can't mistake it for any totalitarian government. And so The right obviously is winning right now at the moment. I don't know that they're really winning in the hearts and minds of the majority of our population, but they've achieved a certain amount of position where they can behave with a certain amount of totalitarian power, and they're doing it. They arose from and are doing it based on some what I would call fascist ideas. Obviously, they are blaming both a mysterious cabal of mostly fictional people along with certain populations for all of our problems in sometimes stupid ways, such as the cats and dogs thing, and they're trying to make our country great again. Pointing away from that and just saying that people who want to grab your guns are the real ones because, you're not going to be able to fight for your freedom if you don't have your guns. And so I guess they have some mistaken idea of fascism simply as being totalitarianism, and that side is the totalitarian one, and they want to take your guns. This canard is as old as time. Even back before the internet, they would say that, one of the big things the fascists did was take away your guns so they could take away your freedoms. Sometimes a totalitarian movement, especially a pseudo-populist one, wants there to be a lot of guns in the hands of its favorite people to terrorize other people. Whatever. This is dumb. Let's move on. The Bible is clear. Male and female are the only genders. Yeah, I'm actually at this point surprised I haven't seen more transgender allusions. Maybe we'll get more here soon. Yeah, I don't know that the Bible is really that clear about that. I think it probably only refers to male and female sexes and by extension gender identities. And yeah, that specific society had some pretty specific traditional roles around men and women. Why do I care what the scripture of one culture says about that issue? Assuming it's even expressing any awareness of transgenderism to take a stand on it. It's almost as if ancient people didn't really give much thought to transgender identities and just only specifically referred to cisgendered men and women. I don't care. And now we have Bill Maher. Cool. This one says, Bill Maher refuses to do stand-up comedy again because I could get shot by the left or the right. So I guess we don't know the entire context of what Bill Maher said. There's kind of two different forms of communication going on here. There's whatever Bill Maher meant when he expressed that, and then there's the fact that somebody thought that this was worth snipping, and whether this was originally a headline for the article or not, somebody thought this was worth grabbing and passing around the internet as an expression of some kind of idea. So whatever. I guess there's been some violence lately. Let's maybe address the guns and stuff like that. Maybe, I guess it could be the right or the left. There's demonstrably been a lot more violence and terrorism from the right than the left in this country. But of course, the right has tried to blame everything all on the left. Bill Maher, I guess, is technically right. It could come from anywhere. A lot of these people had mixed political identities. But this just feels like more Bill Maher straddling the fence, trying to both sides everything, and I just don't care. Bill Maher's just kind of a weasel. Okay, and race relations were headed in the right direction, but then the Obamas got elected and set our country back 200 years. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm not 100% sure what they mean by this. I think I have the flavor of it. And one thing I can be confident of is whoever posted this and said this can just eat shit. I'm sure they can come up with some examples of how Obama stirred up racial tensions in our country. Not really examples. I can't remember if I said examples, but they can give excuses for it. But let's be clear. The real problem here is that a black person got elected president and they didn't care for that. So instead of saying it, they came up with all kinds of excuses about him supposedly not being born in this country when he clearly was, that he just made race relations worse. Again, how at the time this has been circulated, we're living in a Trump world. And if you think Obama created racial problems and Trump didn't, and you think racism has just basically not been, it doesn't say it hasn't been a problem for 200 years. I don't know. When it says they were going in the right direction, they set us back 200 years. It's almost like they think that things have been better for a while. This is just racist garbage. Yeah, eat shit. Again, that's the only point I can reiterate about this, I guess. Oh, this one looks like a doozy. There's a sign that says Americans Against Islamification. That sign looks a tiny bit Photoshopped, but I can't tell if it is or not. Breaking. Hundreds of bold Christians just marched straight into Muslim-majority Dearborn, Michigan, waving crosses and American flags, shouting, Jesus is Lord and no Sharia in America. They came in peace, but with a thunderous message. Islam will never conquer the USA. The line has been drawn. America stays Christian and free. God damn, that is about one of the worst things I've ever seen in a while. What do you even do with that? So I don't know if this actually happened. I'm not going to fact check this one. Like I said, I don't know if that image has been photoshopped to include Americans Against Islamification. Regardless, they are spreading the idea that it happened and they seem happy about it. Okay, so let's just take a step back and think about what they're saying and celebrating. In a community where a group of people was practicing a religion, people from another religion marched in and said, basically, we don't want you here. And they say this is about freedom. Number one, they came in peace. They didn't come in peace. They weren't practicing open violence, but this isn't a peaceful gesture. Come on, you're marching in and telling people we don't want you there. Yeah, would you take this as peaceful if in a Christian community somewhere, maybe in the Middle East or anywhere else, a bunch of Muslims marched up and said, we don't want Christians here, get out of here, you're not, whatever? No. They would be able to see what this actually is if the roles were reversed. Yeah, I don't know. This is such gross tribalistic, verging on violence thinking, and the fact that it parks in the minds of anybody and they think it's cool, it bothers me, of course. And now there's the idea that Muslims are coming over here. But again, if there was a Christian church in the Middle East in a traditionally Muslim country, they wouldn't think this gesture was cool. Also, Christianity has spread itself all over the world more than Islam has. So yeah, whatever. If Democrats feel comfortable with what your church teaches, you are not in a good church. All right. So I'm going to have to start going through these a little faster. I have a lot of these left. But this is just simply associating religion with your politics. I don't know. I wouldn't say that either political party is purely in line with Christianity. I mean, the majority of evangelicalism is in lockstep behind one of the most, frankly, non-religious, perverted, crass, mean-spirited people. Trump has at least expressed this personality more openly than any other politician, even if that resided in the hearts of other ones. And so I don't know, to say that the Republicans own the relationship with Christianity or that they reflect the nature of Christianity and Democrats simply don't. You're just making your religion an expression of your politics and you expect everybody to do the same. Whatever. All right, a picture of Donald Trump dressed as a magician. For my next trick, I will make the Democrat side with Jeffrey Epstein. This is dumb. This is just more of a smokescreen about the whole Epstein and Trump issue. I don't think Democrats are siding with Jeffrey Epstein. You can think both guys are wrong and bad and stupid and gross, and I'm being lighthearted about this. You can say that they are both horrific people who have both done horrific things, and I don't get where they're saying they're siding with Epstein. I mean, I know there was some history of Trump and Epstein fighting with each other. That doesn't mean that if you criticize one, you like the other one. I don't know. This is just another thing where they know what's going on and they're trying to obscure it with a bunch of twists of wordplay. All right, I think this is Jack Sparrow walking off a ship. We have Democrats leaving the state they just ruined and going to red states. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is probably true. There's a lot of migration between states. There are some trends of people moving from certain blue states to certain red states. I think a lot of it has to do with just the nature of remote work. A lot of red states are poorer and you can live there cheaper while doing a job, that's located somewhere else. So I think that's part of it. Also, a lot of these moves are turning red states blue, and a lot of these moves are to blue cities within red states. This is just meme politics in a nutshell, right? It doesn't mean anything. There might be a tiny thread of truth to it, or something close enough to a thread of truth that somebody on your side will find it validating and just run with it. Okay, cool. All right, so now we have an article by the Babylon Bee. And by the way, before I look at this one, I grabbed a few Babylon Bee screenshots. It's just gross. It fashions itself or fancies itself as a Christian version of The Onion. So it's just a bunch of irreverent humor. What we're going to see play out here is that it's really not that irreverent. It's not trying to take potshots at just everything to be funny. It has a clear agenda, and it's often pretty gross about it. So let's take a look at this one. Grandma wonders why Skillet can't just make nice, pretty songs riddled with false doctrine like normal Christian bands. Okay, this is kind of a typical form of Christian infighting, I think. What is false doctrine? Doctrine and theology and stuff like that is arbitrary. It's whatever you believe it is. Nothing about it refers to anything demonstrable about reality. Yes, if you're a biblical literalist, you might think that aligning with the Bible or not proves whether doctrine is true or not. But even taking the Bible as the inerrant word of God and a certain specific canon as the inerrant word of God is an arbitrary act. A lot of this is based on interpretation, of course. But Christians will go pretty hard on other Christians. And I've seen this. I've seen this with somebody I used to go to college with. I'm not going to name names or get that specific. But some people get really caught up on this idea that certain music is false doctrine or it's not really expressing true communication with God. It's some kind of other sentiment. That's probably true to a certain extent. But that's just because Christian music is co-opting just the language of music and the emotion of it and trying to make it about God. So whatever. This is just Christians pointing fingers at each other. Okie dokie. So this one's a little complicated. What your teacher told you versus reality. And I guess these are like political spectrums. So one has communist on one side and fascist on the other. Moderate in the middle, Democrat and Republican. As you get more liberal, you become communist. As you get more conservative, you become fascist. Reality, moderates in the middle, and that's constitutionalist. Okay, whatever. That feels pretty arbitrary. As you go to the left from moderate, you become liberal, then socialist, then total government, which is communism and fascism. And if you're right, you go conservative, libertarian. And if you go far enough, you lead toward anarchy and freedom. Okay, so the biggest thrusts here is that the left is tyranny and the right is liberty. I just caught that part of it because this is all kind of jumbled. None of this captures the real right and the left. I don't want to break this all down and belabor it. Again, I have a lot more images to go through. I'll try to make these a little quicker. The right clearly is about more than just personal freedom, right? It has a lot to say about what you can and can't do. And of course, we have to equate fascism with the left and say it's the same thing as communism. Whatever, this is so tiring. Let's go. According to information in the Bible, no one is even in hell right now. Another one of these things that's just an expression of Christian theology and world building. According to information in the Bible, I think we need to put some quotes around that one because it's not really information. It's just expounding on people's personal mythology from within that culture. I don't know why this is important, whether people are in hell now or will be later. I don't know if the Bible's even really that clear about it. Some parts seem to indicate that people are currently in hell, like the parable, I think, of Lazarus and the rich man. The rich man went to heaven and could see Lazarus across the way. Some people say that's just a parable. Other people say it's not because parables didn't include names. But it would be interesting and weird that Jesus would include a false representation of how hell works in one of his parables. But all that aside, this is just an expression of people's personal religious views, and they take it as so factual that they think everybody else needs to believe it. And I think at the core of all this, Christians and all other religious people just need to really sit down and have a sense of humility about the fact that they've just pulled these ideas out of thin air. And even if they pulled it out of the Bible, whoever wrote the Bible pulled it out of thin air. I can't prove that, but they're clearly not referring to anything demonstrable in reality. All right, this has somebody with a No Kings pin on. I guess D stands for Democrat. There's a guy behind him that looks like an extra hand sticking out of his jacket saying no borders. MSNBC, CNN, so that's representing the fake media. We have Antifa. Cool. All right. We support men and girls. Fuck you, dudes. Come on. Leave our criminals alone. So, yeah, it's all a bunch of fake news, Antifa boogeymen, people who want men to be in women's sports because that's what supporting transgender people is about. And we just support our criminals. Instead of supporting the troops, we support our criminals. Where on the other side, Trump and the Republican Party and a construction worker holding a MAGA sign, they're in the center. So Yeah, just eat shit for so many reasons with this meme. But among those reasons, of course, just pretending that MAGA is the center of the line and everybody else is just way out there. Yeah, I think this is kind of core to their political narrative. It's not great, is it? So I guess now we're getting into some creationism stuff. Tiktaalik is not a transitional form. Who cares? I don't know. Every piece of life is a transitional form, but creationists have this really dumb idea that you can draw a box around current animals, a dog, a cat, an ape. Each of those is a real animal and everything between is a transition. No, everything's a transition. It's like a rainbow. It's like pointing to a rainbow and saying which of those colors is real color and which is a transition between those real colors. Cool, whatever. But the thing I find fascinating and kind of depressing, again, is that grown-ass adults take this seriously. This is so obviously wrong, not just from a scientific standpoint, but from a semantic standpoint. And they still think this means something. All right, so in this one, we have a bunch of people on a boat. I can't tell exactly what their ethnicity is by looking at them, but I think they're clearly coded to be brown people. You know, who would ever have thought? If you enter our country illegally, you should never get asylum. Are you sure about that? I mean, number one, what does it mean to enter our country legally? That's a more complex question than a lot of people realize. It can be hard to do. You come in speaking another language. They don't really apply a lot of resources and support to the whole process of naturalization, especially if you're coming over in emergency circumstances. And if the shoe were on the other foot, if you were escaping a country, a dangerous situation in another country, whether you're being persecuted or there was just tons of crime around you, wouldn't you want to be able to run somewhere and be accepted and not have this line drawn on if you did anything illegal in the process of getting here, that process being tricky as it is, you should never get asylum. It's just so heartless at its core. No matter what situation you came from, if there was any glitch in the legal process or you didn't follow everything step by step, go back and die. There's just some deep, heartless racism to this. Oh, and by the way, I think one other thing I want to say to this is it's interesting how they pick and choose when the law just absolutely defines what's right and wrong. With abortion, you know, the fact that abortion's legal didn't make it right. You can understand how a law, at least in theory, doesn't define right and wrong, and sometimes you should challenge a law or take into account whether that law is the only factor you should understand when trying to decide how to react to certain people. And so maybe people trying to escape other countries under desperate circumstances is a time that you should think about something other than the law. And if you don't, maybe there's something else about these people or whichever people you're talking about that makes you just not care and maybe just makes you not want them to be here. Again, you're probably a racist on some level. All right, here is an angry lady with a resist shirt and yeah, purple hair. Okay, we're just throwing all the signifiers out there. But if you homeschool your kids, they won't fit in with, and then it quit. I don't know if that was supposed to be that person getting interrupted or if this was made by AI clearly and they didn't finish the rest of the words. I don't know. And then the dad says, that's the point. All right. Homeschooling in a nutshell, I guess, and also maybe pulling your kids into a Christian school. We don't want them to fit in. We want them to be different. Yeah, we get the point. And aside from that, obviously this is a jab at this kind of person, anybody who resists the political leaders that you like the most and has purple hair. We want our kids to be different from you. This verges on, if not is explicitly expressing just dehumanizing sentiments. We hate all those people so much, or maybe not hate, but we dislike them so much and think they're so bad that we want to make sure our kids don't fit in with any of them. And they're basically just rubber stamps of us who believe the things we do and fit in with the people we like. Cool. All right. If Noah's Ark is found, then there was a recent global flood. Okay, Noah's Ark was not and will not be found. I'm pretty confident. I can't say that with absolute certainty, just like I can't say that we'll never, to use the classic example, find a teapot orbiting out in space. But setting all that aside, this statement is just demonstrably wrong. You could find an ark, and that doesn't mean diddly squat as far as whether there was a global flood. Who knows why that boat was there? This is self-validating fundamentalist Christianity in a nutshell, I think, and just how apologetics works. You have to start with a conclusion you're looking to validate, and you take everything that fits even a piece of that puzzle as validating the whole thing. If you started without Christianity and without trying to validate it, and that being the goal of all your exploration and, fact finding, you would take a boat as just being a boat. You don't know why it's there. You don't know what they're trying to float in and why. An ark could be anything. So why do you think it means there was a global flood? Maybe there was a local flood. Maybe they were just trying to sail somewhere. Okay. It just says a lot about what they're trying to do and how unserious their intellectual journey is. Okay, intellectual journey feels a little harsh and seems targeted at people, but that's just the gist of how evangelicalism and fundamentalism as a body expresses ideas and what they're trying to do with them. All right, so here we have a very scientific-looking chart, I guess showing how tall the Tower of Babel was, specifically in relation to modern skyscrapers. So it was many times taller than the Burj Khalifa, the Shanghai Tower, World Trade, whatever. And I guess they back this up with a scripture from Jubilees 19:10. I guess that's probably an apocryphal book of the Bible. It says the height extended to 5,433 cubits. Yeah, if you take a standard measure of a cubit, then that is true. So I don't know what this is supposed to tell us other than that this story is stupid. Maybe this is a fun curiosity for people who believe in this story, and especially the Jubilees version of it. I don't think the Bible gives these measurements. The Bible, I mean, the traditionally understood Protestant canon in the book of Genesis. Yeah, I guess this is a fine way of expressing, the curiosity of what your Bible says to people who believe in it, and that, wow, this building would have been tall. But you're just telling on your story for being dumb. There's no way that building could have been that tall. That's absurd, especially a brick building. Engineering doesn't work that way. Sorry, guys. There's a reason they don't make skyscrapers out of baked bricks. All right, another Trump and Epstein thing. Character, of course, with colored hair, pink hair this time. Trump was best friends with Epstein! ! It shows them next to each other. Epstein hated Trump. That proves Trump is a bad man. And it says, Epstein, I have met some very bad people, none as bad as Trump, not one decent cell in his body. All right, so this is just obviously incredibly dumb. To the people who made this thing or who think anything like this, please understand the reason we don't like Trump. Well, there are multiple reasons regarding a lot of his politics and the way he talks about people and stuff like that. And again, the way he talks about people is not inconsequential. I'm not going to go down that path. In this case, the issue is, the kinds of abuse that were happening and that these two people seem to have been involved in. You might think that those facts haven't been fully litigated, and so I'm not going to state them as fact, I guess, for legal reasons, but they both seem pretty filthy. By the way, other politicians do too, and I'm not letting them off the hook. So to make this all hinge on whether he was friends with Epstein or whether they're fighting, who cares about any of that? Both of them could be horrible people. The fact that he's friends with him is not the issue. The fact that he's friends with him kind of connects him to those activities, right? And people like them can do horrible things and then fight with each other. And it's not like our parents got divorced and we're going to pick one over the other. I'm sorry. If when it comes down to the core of it and the punchline of this thing, none of us are saying that Epstein not liking Trump proves he's a bad man. I don't even think that perspective exists out there. Okay. We have some Democratic politicians at the top. Obama and the Clintons says enemy of the United States, and then some Republican congressman, not enemy of the United States. Yeah. All right. This is just identifying them as the enemy and us as not. What do I even say to this? I guess the problem is that this is as simple as their thinking is. They're evil, they're the enemy, and we're not. What's more to be said about that? Oh, another health thing. And yeah, we have a LGBTQ flag. More colored hair. People who post this stuff and the evangelical / conservatives behind it, they really have a thing for colored hair. I don't know why that is, but I guess let's read this thing and see what they have to say. I think we know the flavor of it. Many call it unloving to call the LGBTQ community to repentance, but if we believe what the Bible clearly says on this subject, it's actually hateful to not inform sinners of all kinds of the coming judgment. And these so-called ministers who are affirming this behavior are leading their flocks to hell. They are shepherds for Satan. Well, that escalated quickly. Yeah. This is more just expressing statements of your theology and mythology. So who cares? I guess where this takes it a step further, and where the problem is with this, is when you don't have that sense of humility about where you got these ideas and how completely arbitrary they are, and the fact that they don't reflect anything about demonstrable reality, and you think you need to express them to other people, and that doing that is a kindness. You have no informed reason to think the LGBTQ community or anybody else is going to hell. And so if you came up with that idea out of thin air, or again, you're someone who wrote something in your book of scripture came up with it out of thin air, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. And so if you're going to take something so flimsy and bring it to the faces of other people and warn them that they are sinning, there's a lot of different ways that can be done, but any of them are pretty gross. If you develop a friendship with somebody, I guess you can tell them what your theology says. But yeah, it isn't loving to go around telling people that who they are at their core and who they love and how they live is not in line with your religion. Would you want Muslims coming to you and talking to you about eating bacon, or whatever, any person from any other religion expressing their theology to you, getting in their face about it? Would you take it as loving? You might understand in theory that they mean something loving, but I think you'd see the problem. All right, so more creation stuff, huh? Moses describing Noah's flood. By the way, it wasn't Moses. He didn't write Genesis, but whatever, that's a whole other thing. 2348 BC. I'm not going to read all that. Yao describing China's flood, 2300 BC. Yeah, I'm assuming these two things are the same. I'm not going to sit here and read them, but assuming they were, who cares? Different cultures describe floods similarly. It doesn't mean that water covered the whole earth up to the top of the highest mountain. That's stupid. It's also a dumb conclusion. It's the same as with the ark thing. Unless you're looking to validate a specific religious conclusion, this connection would clearly just mean that the language they used to describe floods was similar. Who cares? Whatever. The socialist dream versus the socialist reality. I don't think I need to describe this. You can pretty much see it. Everybody's happy and sharing things in one picture, and they're lined up apparently in gulags or something in the other. And everything's in black and white. Cool. Yeah. There's not much to say about this, except that I think this is just at the core of a lot of conservative thinking, which is you just take the idea of any kind of socialism and it just runs straight down to Stalinism. That's all. Socialism is the same, and that's where it gets you. It's just a thought terminating cliche at its core. The fact that, or the idea that any kind of socialism, number one, is the same. It's all adds up to communism, and it's all going to take you to, the worst of the 20th century dictatorships. But that's how a lot of this seems to go. You just plant this vivid idea into people's heads, and that just gets them to stop considering other ideas. Socialism is kind of a continuum, and it doesn't have to be bad. It doesn't have to lead to full-on communism, certainly not to authoritarianism. And when you think about it, a lot of the public services you use and want, such as roads and police and fire departments and stuff like that, that's kind of socialized. You're looking to the government to provide certain services. You're not trying to enforce your own laws and protect yourself. You're not trying to put out your own fires. You rely on the government to do that. So maybe we could push that a little further and not totally descend into a Stalinistic dystopia. But they don't want to consider that for obvious reasons. And maybe more to the point, business interests don't want to consider that. But I think that's part of how a lot of the right thinks. A lot of the ideas on the right are so simplified, are so based on basic sentiments and kind of certain forms of hate. This one isn't specifically hateful, but a lot of them are. There's certain forms of hate for other religions, other races, and just other ideas you don't want to think about that is easy to express in just an image and a few words. And I think because a lot of the, especially extreme right, is just so non-nuanced at its core ideas, that's why this stuff works. And that might be part of why the internet is just kind of dooming us all to a worse political and conversational landscape. All right. Geez, okay. Here we have the Israelites worshiping the golden calf in Exodus and Catholics worshiping Mary. Yeah, it's kind of a typical Protestant thing. I don't think the Catholics really worship Mary. They pray to her, I guess, for her to intercede to God, kind of as saints do. Number one, this is neither here nor there to me. I don't care how any religion describes the mechanics of what happens when you speak things into the open air and who they think hears you. That's all nothing, basically. It's as undemonstrable as anything else that the religious people believe. Not religious people, religious teaching. People who are religious can believe in all kinds of things, obviously. But this is just typical Protestant dumping on Catholics. Who cares? Let's move on. They might not be wearing Soviet uniforms when they come for your guns, but they will be communists nonetheless. So, two ideas. Again, this is another thought-terminating thing. I think once we identify that thread, this kind of describes most of this stuff. Number one, everybody who wants to control guns at all is coming for your guns to fight or take away your freedom, and they're all communists. So once you just throw that socialist or communist label out there, you've basically absolved yourself and your audience of doing any work of thinking about anything, and I think that's the point. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. I assume that's Michelle Obama. I don't even think that takes a lot of assumption. Girl, being the black first lady is so exhausting. God damn. Can you just come right out there and be openly racist? Yeah, I guess she's lazy. Why are you having her say being the black first lady? And obviously, I think this means something when it shows, I think two of the people are her kids waiting on her, and then a bunch of white servants. Is clearly meant to communicate something in this picture. I think this is kind of like the first lady version of a welfare queen is what they're trying to show us. This is just gross. And, there's a level of underlying racism to a lot of these to various degrees. This one just put it straight out there for us, didn't it? Go fuck yourself. Noah's Ark. Why the antagonism? It's not antagonism as much as you hold to a really stupid belief and people either don't care or they're going to get irritated because the belief is stupid. It's anti-scientific. It, contributes to religious ideas that can lead to authoritarianism. When people accept this at face value, they'll accept anything at face value. Does that explain why there's antagonism? Also, if you're going to express something just either non-demonstrable and paranormal or just clearly stupid, people are either going to ignore you or, they'll push back, I guess. Interpreting that as antagonism is just an easy way out of acknowledging that you're being held accountable for what you believe and maybe stepping up and dealing with that. Oh, here we go. So, speaking of racism, we have another Babylon Bee one. To save time, ICE begins mass arrests of everyone at soccer fields. So, I guess maybe I'm jumping to conclusions when I call this racist. Taken in isolation, I could see this as a critique of ICE. They're not going after the worst of the worst. They're not going after the criminals. They just want to get a certain number of Hispanic people or just anybody who's brown, whether or not they're an immigrant, and throw them in a van without due process. And so, why not just go to a soccer field and do that? Because Hispanic people play a lot of soccer, I guess. Even the best explanation of this gets racist when you think about it for 5 seconds. But given the history of the Babylon Bee and everything it says and everything it expresses, I don't think this was meant to criticize ICE. It seems like this was just heartless at best and insensitive. And, it doesn't seem to be saying anything specifically negative about Latin people. But it's just throwing out this weird barf that's meant to sound just playfully satirical, but it does it in a really mean way. And the fact that they think this is funny without caring even enough to be mean or racist, and their racism can just come out this casually is almost worse. I don't know if it is. But it's pretty dire. It's gross. But to get a better sense of what this article was, or at least how it was received, I did look at the comments. So let's glance at some of those. And if they refer to it as football instead of soccer, they're definitely worth a second look. Cool. Yeah. So basically, if they're Mexican or if they use a Spanish word for soccer, then, they need out of here. A playful wink. If they have room afterwards, they can top off the paddy wagon at the local Home Depot. They can just walk around the soccer field listening for anybody who says football. I guess they're really hung up on that, not using the word football for American football and soccer for, the one where you kick the ball. The Home Depot thing. Nice. Good job, buddy. They could try to arrest everyone driving a white van with ladder racks. Okay, so the Home Depot thing and the white van thing, that's, just going after people who are trying to look for construction work or whatever, I guess. This just shows me they're just celebrating rounding up anybody from a Latin country or who's just brown. But maybe you should stop and think about why, especially with the white van with ladder racks thing, why, if you see that, you're assuming anything about their ethnicity or what country they might have come from. If they're filling those roles so thoroughly that you see a van and assume that it's, not a white native-born American, I'm using those terms very loosely, I know, but you get what I mean in terms of their thinking. If you make that assumption, maybe the immigrant community is filling a lot of important roles, and you should think about something other than the fact that you just don't want them here. I don't know, but they're not going to. I don't know. The Babylon Bee seems to be at least encouraging racism in its audience, or at the very least, it really attracts a lot of racist commenters. So I think they're filling in the subtext of this article. Babylon Bee is continuing to be the Babylon Bee. That's why they call it the Bee. Ooh, another Babylon Bee. Okay. Trump to host exciting new game show. Which member of Congress should I have executed? God damn it. I don't know. Is this supposed to be a criticism of Trump? I don't think so. We'll probably see played out throughout this that maybe not. We only have a few of these left, by the way, just in case you're feeling like this is getting a little long. If you are, you're probably not watching anymore. So whatever. Yeah, I think this is just taking this whole thing lightly and treating it as a joke, which isn't good. Kind of like the soccer thing, I guess. All right. And by the way, I just went and glanced at the actual article. It's just frivolous nonsense about it being a game show. So I think they're just treating it lightly. They're not even trying to say anything one way or the other. It seems like they just think the president calling for the execution of other politicians fairly frivolously is just funny. And that's about where the Babylon Bee parks, I think. Either it's openly trashy toward, certain political or racial groups, or, basically glazing up Trump or other right-wing politicians, or it just casually doesn't care. Okay, let's move on. We have a lady, again, with blue hair, okay? Says blue state holding an LGBTQ and Mexican flag and yelling at Trump. Trump pours a bucket of ice on her. Oh, wow, a metaphor. Cool. And then when he pours the ice on her, her shirt now says red state. All her paraphernalia is gone. She doesn't have colored hair anymore. Also, she doesn't have glasses or a nose ring, which I guess she had before. So, okay, anyway. Not even really sure what that means, except I guess maybe that Trump is going to use ICE to get rid of certain identities and change the cultural landscape of our country. That's taking this pretty literally, but I feel like that's the sentiment this is expressing. And for some reason, they have that colored hair thing just really on their mind. That's not only is that a problem, but when Trump fixes our country, the women are all going to have nice blonde hair like God intended, I suppose. But yeah, I feel like without taking this too literally, that's the catharsis that comes from this is we're getting rid of blue states and we're getting rid of protesters and women who have rings and support the LGBTQ community, and blah, blah, blah. We're remaking society. That just seems to be the sentiment of this. Okay. Funny how people who say, stop pushing your beliefs on me, are always the first to preach atheism. A big part of this is conflating preaching, which again, they kind of seem to be stretching the definition of preaching and just giving your opinion on something are two different things. But then they throw in pushing your beliefs on people. I don't think saying you lack a belief in God is the same as pushing your beliefs on people. In fact, when you talk about Christianity, just an average Christian who just, prays and goes to church and stuff like that, telling other people about it, I don't even think that's what people mean when they say pushing your beliefs. I think they talk about something more like, telling people who they can marry and how they should live and stuff like that based on your religion. And so I don't see a lot of atheists doing that, except in cases where they're just expressing basic humanist ideals and stuff. I guess this gets a little tricky though, because atheism is a really broad group of people who just don't believe in God. So I'm probably making some simplifications here. But the trick is, so is this meme. There's all kinds of atheists who do all kinds of things. And so it's okay for someone to say, stop pushing your belief on me if they're trying to just really get in your face with their ideas of religion and how it means you should live according to them. And you're still an atheist. This is just dismissiveness. I guess that's at the core of this. I probably over explained it, but this is just trying to blow off a criticism of religion with a silly equivalency. That's probably what I could have just said. Maybe I'll edit some of that out. Baby's first White House visit. So there's a little baby Mandami. He even has a sippy cup and a pacifier on the floor. Okay. We're just being openly racist at this point, right? I mean, what's the point of that otherwise? You can say, well, it's because he's young and he's inexperienced, stuff like that. This is clearly meant to be racial. Yeah. Maybe think about the fact that somebody that Trump called a socialist and a lot of other people do just went in there and successfully rizzed up your president. Maybe think about how senile the guy is and how weirdly he flipped during that meeting. But I have no use for this. This is just pure gross racism and just dismissiveness. Whatever, eat shit. This is gross. But I guess the fact that these things are out there is still consequential. This affects people's thinking, and at its core, as much as being racist, it's a thought terminating cliche. It gets people to stop thinking about certain things and certain people and their ideas. Imagine a world without religion. And yeah, we know where this is going. There's Lenin and a communist flag and a really just bleak looking society. We did imagine it. It killed tens of millions. Officially, atheist governments in the 20th century are responsible for blah, 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 blah. That whole canard about the number of deaths atheists are responsible for is pretty silly. We know this stuff. It's not atheism specifically. It's some totalitarian governments who were largely godless. Not all of them were, by the way. And they were large governments with large populations who were able to kill on an industrial scale. Also, it took into account things like starvation and stuff based on mismanagement that, yes, the church has contributed to over time, and they just don't count those numbers. That's whatever. At its core, this is just ignore them. They're all communists. So cool. Good. Nice. Types of headaches: migraine, hypertension, stress. Hearing an atheist talk about morality covers your entire head, except apparently not your nose and your mouth. Cool. So there's literally nothing here except these kinds of people annoy us, and we don't like hearing them talk. So another thought-terminating cliche. Also, of course, is about morality. And so Christians just give themselves the easy line that we know nothing about morality or have nothing to say about it, or morality is internally inconsistent on atheism. Whatever. Yeah. All right. I got a picture of some presidents. I have a feeling I know the flavor where this is going to go. Bill Clinton, 12.5 million deportations, 0 arrests/riots. George W. Bush, 10.3 million deportations, 0 protests/riots. Obama, 5.3 million deportations, 0 protests/riots. I'm not even really sure this is true, by the way. I think there probably were some protests about that, but whatever. Donald Trump, 1.5 million deportations, 350 protests / riots. This is so tiring. First off, I'm not sure these numbers are true, so give me a minute and let me check on that. Okay, yeah, so when I look into it, these numbers are a little messy at best. But first off, the number of deportations under Clinton was incredibly small. Not that I'm a huge fan of him, but here's the core thing. I went and calculated the numbers, and the closest thing I could do to get to the 12.5 million they came up with for Clinton was add a combination of ineligible residents in the U.S. who voluntarily left the country with people who were actually deported. That's the only thing I could do to get close to that number. I got like almost 11 million by adding that up. He had the smallest actual deportation numbers. I don't know if there's a certain amount of pressure behind those voluntary departures, and I'm not going to dig into this too much more. This is obviously such a stupid thing on its face. Setting aside these numbers, which I think are obviously, if not entirely made up, highly massaged, the problem isn't just the number of deportations. It's who he's deporting, how he's grabbing people off the street and stuff like that. I think we all know that. By the way, he's deported, I think from what I found, by October of this year, ICE had deported over, 500,000 people, which was the highest yearly total for anybody in history, I think. So by October, I think they'd set a record. So we're looking at high deportation numbers, but also it's just how they do it. Just grabbing people and throwing them in the vans with no due process, sticking them in detention centers, that whole alligator Alcatraz thing. You think there's nothing there worth protesting? Also, are all those protests just about immigration? Maybe there's other issues at play here. Other things people don't like about Trump? Are we going to acknowledge that? No. We're just going for a thought-stopping simplification. One other weird thing about this is they can't even keep their story straight. Like they're in such a hurry to just go to a gotcha fact that they'll invalidate one point while making another one. And don't they all want Trump deporting huge numbers of people? Isn't that what he promised to do? Isn't that what he said he's doing? And isn't that something they're happy about? Yet as soon as they want to call everybody hypocrites, now all of a sudden he's the least deportation-ing president in the last several years. So whatever. Obama's not on this for some reason. Not Obama. Biden's not on this for some reason. I don't know. Whatever. Jeez. Okay. Christians who send their kids to public school, and Satan's putting a medal around the neck of Christians who send their kids to public school. Okay. Those parents bite the medal. So I guess I can't interpret this all as being a point this wants to make. They're probably just co-opting a meme that already exists. Those parents kiss Satan. They say, we're free in the gospel, public school proud. I guess they just really don't like Christians sending their kids to public school. This is a little bit the same as that whole homeschooling thing. You want to withdraw your kids out of society and make them believe really specific things. And this is just amping it up to here in terms of blaming Christian parents who don't do that. When I grew up, we had this mentality that good Christian parents should send their kids to a Christian school. And most of us at that church went to the school that church built and supported and stuff. But eventually we did have one of our pastors say, it's actually fine to go to public school and it's a personal choice. But these people don't seem to believe that same thing to a shocking extent. Parents who don't use Christian schools and send their kids to public schools literally make out with Satan, apparently. Let's look at the bottom part of this, I guess. So we have everybody on the podiums. At the very top is classical Christian education. Okay, that's the best one. Homeschool is a little below that, which that could be a little divisive, I guess, amongst these kinds of people, but whatever. Entering the workforce at 10. Selling your kid. Oh my, all right. And at the bottom is public school. So obviously they think that homeschooling or a classical Christian education is best, but it's best just to have your kid go to work at 10 years old or become a slave. That's better than public school. Yeah. I'm not super shocked by this. It's weird seeing it actually expressed. But gosh, you guys are gross. All right. Last one. Here we go. Ooh, another Babylon Bee. MRI confirms President Donald Trump has incurable advanced stage patriotism. So I think this finishes summing up the Babylon Bee for me. And maybe this helps us understand the previous one about Trump. Of all the things you could say about Trump and his MRIs and stuff, this is just licking his shoes, right? This isn't irreverent. This isn't critical of Trump. And I don't mean you have to specifically criticize Trump. But if you're going to be an Onion-type publication, what you say should at least poke at something at people in power, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, liberal, conservative, whatever. Your headlines about them generally are going to be pointing out some kind of inconsistency or something that should be evaluated. Get us thinking about the people in power, I guess. This is just saying how much we love him, essentially, because he's so patriotic. So, the more you look at the Babylon Bee, and it doesn't usually take long, the more it shows its true colors, I guess. So that was my journey through some right-wing / Christian memes. I guess, I don't know if you call them all memes, but images and posts from social media. I hope you enjoyed it. That's all incredibly stupid. I just wanted to give my reactions to them. I thought it would be kind of fun, even though it got a little tedious and exhausting. This video might turn out being pretty darn long, and I hope I didn't ramble too much. And I hope there weren't just too many of these and it didn't just get a little too repetitive. So let me know what you think in the comments. But aside from being a playful little thing and something to take jabs at and react to, I think this says something significant about political discourse in our country and how it's gotten where it is. Trump is obviously a problem. He's an authoritarian. We're in a pretty dire-ish place now. Who knows how it's going to play out? What kind of pushback might still be viable. But I think it runs deeper than him. And part of it is the internet. Part of it's just the fact that information isn't as centralized and fact-checked as it used to be. And having decentralized information is good to a point. But when anybody can make anything look like decent journalism and the average person doesn't know a vetted piece of journalism that's well-sourced from just pure rumor and speculation, they're just going to gravitate toward whatever appeals to them. And that's what a lot of this is, just stuff that appeals to the right and to Christians. And what we see here is just how purely stupid that can be as long as you scroll through and it appeals to you and makes sense. It works, and that's what defines your reality and your perspective on other people and politics and religion and all of that stuff. And that's obviously not great. And so I don't think getting rid of one politician is going to solve that. And I don't know what digs us out of it eventually. Now, there is something to be said here, which is that who knows how many people buy into this. I'm sure a lot of Christians and conservatives roll their eyes at some of this stuff. I know some of them, people who identify as evangelical and are to some extent conservative, think this is just spun way out of control. So there's people all along the spectrum of conservatism and religious belief that probably don't think much of this and think it's silly. And some of it might just be rage bait, by the way. But I think there are enough people, and when you look at the comments, it seems like it, even maybe accounting for bots, I think this is out there for a reason, and I think it contributes to people's thinking. So that's what we're up against. I don't mean to make this too depressing, but it's part of our lives now, for better or for worse. So that's this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was a little fun, if not too just infuriating and depressing. Tell me what you think about me doing videos this way. And next time I'm going to be doing a reaction to somebody talking about villains in literature and how that person just basically totally misunderstands the concept of evil in a weirdly authoritarian, semi-religious, if not entirely religious way. So that is kind of a mesh of me talking, how I've been talking about more like literature, movies and stuff like that, and the whole opinion thing. So anyway, have a good day, everybody, and I will catch you next time.